This interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research. However, no part of the video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard. Today is January 4th, 2010 at 4:30 p.m. This is an interview with Ellen Hawes in Sarasota, Florida. She was born on September 7th, 1919 in Brooklyn, New York. You were involved with Random House Publishing very early on. What was that like?
That was absolutely wonderful, because I went into Random House in 1942 on the cusp of the Second World War, and just when we became seriously involved. And I was there all during the war, and it was another special time, I feel, for publishing. If we sold 10,000 books, we made back our money. In those days, that's what I remember. It was a success. So there wasn't this need to, have blockbusters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we printed Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. We printed William Faulkner, Sinclair Lewis. The wonderful woman who did the African thing, Baroness von Blixen, Karen von Blixen. All the people, out of Africa with, did you see that film with Meryl Streep? That was Karen Blixen. She was Danish, I think, as I remember. We published other books of hers, and she came over during the war, and there was a little reception for her, and I actually met her. I met the original Meryl Streep, as they would say, and so we had that. Also, I was married, so I was their USO representative. Because the USO was in charge of paying attention to the troops, to their needs. And one of their needs was when they came into New York for a leave, they had to be entertained. So we arranged young girls to dance with them, to feed them food, and it was all at the Hotel Pennsylvania. So it was Benny Goodman and all the great bands, and we got young girls to volunteer to dance with the soldiers if they came in from England. Some of them were French, from the French islands, even though France was occupied. Yeah. They joined the whole thing. Some came from even places like Yugoslavia, because I can remember meeting a Yugoslavian merchantman who was in and came to have food served, and it was quite wonderful. I mean, we incorporated the war into our program there. But Bennett Cerf, whom was in charge of affairs, it was owned by three men at the time. It was Donald Klopfer, somebody named Robert Haas, and Bennett Cerf. And Bennett Cerf, Donald Klopfer was away. He was, I think, a rather high officer in the Army, and he was away. Robert Haas was somewhere, because he had also been in the Army. He had been a captain or something, but he was not always on site. But Bennett Cerf was, and he was in charge. And it was another one of those incredible experiences where we had literature and wonderful working conditions, and little salary. I made $35 a week before I got kicked up to editorial. I was in the publishing, the publicity department. I came in as a relief operator on the switchboard, which was one of those, you wouldn't even know what those switchboards were, because
on the printing press?
No, it was a switchboard. We had phones here,
yeah.
And then we had plugs here, and we plugged in and said Random House. I was a relief operator, and Maggie Reynolds was a longtime operator, And I spent a lot of time on the switchboard because Maggie always had a glass of what I presumed to be water on the the boards were very broad. I mean, they were like and you know, things were up here. You had to switch in up here. If you ever seen Lily Tomlin, any of her shows, she's a comedian. She always played a switchboard operator, you know.
Mhm.
And so I'd plug in and say Random House, and if I was in so I would do that every day for 15 minutes, presumably in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. But Maggie Reynolds did not have water in that glass. She had gin. So by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Maggie Reynolds was saying, "This is Random House." So I would be dragged out to go and carry on the switchboard. She'd been there for years, done that for years, but nobody minded, and I least of all. And so and the management didn't care. So she was a standard. It was not, but the world was like that then in a kind of a way. They accepted her, and they didn't edit her, you know. They didn't do anything to her, and so I finally one day, Bennett Cerf knew that I had that I wanted to do editorial rather than publicity, which was not bad at all because I was also in the publicity department meeting a lot of people that were on, you know, that had to do with the theater, which I was interested in. So they were friends of Bennett, or they had something to do with publishing in some way. So, you know, I met or read the letters of all the leading playwrights, actors, and various people in the theater when I was filing the thing, or they came in for an interview, or they called on the telephone or whatever. But one day I made a mistake. I picked up the telephone and I was sort of heedless, and I said, "This is a duplicity." I said, "No, publicity department." And it was one of Bennett Cerf's friends from Broadway who told him about it. And the next day he came in and he said, "Who in this department said duplicity instead of publicity?" And I said, "I did." And he said, "You're a dangerous woman. You're out of here. We're sending you up to editorial."
It's unbelievable.
So that's the way I got kicked upstairs. That's where my salary was increased from $35 a week to $55 a week. So that was quite a jump up. And that was my world. It had no relationship to most other people's worlds. Maybe even then, I don't know. Although I think there was more of that going on everywhere than we know, because I don't think Random House was special. I think probably Knopf and all the leading publishers of the day were. There was a wonderful thing that what changed a lot of the literature. Random House did wonderful editions. They did the Modern Library, which was, you know, books, unobtainable books, very inexpensive, that were the beginnings of the paperback. It was the beginning of the whole paperback revolution. I'm pretty sure. I haven't, you know, researched that, but I think probably we began it with the Modern Library. Although our books were published at first with bound, but they were much easier to carry around, and they were made available. And they were some of the great books and some of the books of the day it was the modern classics. And so we really were on. It was being part of a very, very special world, again, almost universal. Although it was publishing, it was different, and we knew everybody in the publicity department. We knew everybody in the management department. We knew everybody in the where the manufacturing department, and we were all part of this whole experience, whether we were on the switchboard or whether we were in. Sax Cummings was a very famous editor of that time, and if you ever, you know, if you Google him, he brought a lot of wonderful writers to their full capacity with his editing and his advice. And he was extremely well known in the editing field and in the publishing world. And yet I knew, I mean, I would call him Sax, although I was just a switchboard operator at first, because there wasn't, nothing was layered. It seemed to be all, maybe it was the war that did it. I don't know, sometimes, but I think a lot of it happened before that too. Because when I came in, it was a little bit before we became really deeply engaged in the war.